welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break, and for the audience here on site, also the networking moments. I remind the online audience that you can use the chat, so keep communicating with us in this way. And now I am delighted to present the second panel of the morning, this time on heritage-led international relations, so the second big ILUCIDARE topic. And this panel is entitled Positioning Heritage and Communities in the Vast Pool of Knowledge and Experience on International Relations. So we will first hear from the ILUCIDARE project, findings and challenges, through a joint presentation by my colleague Elisabetta Airaghi, Senior Consultant at KIA European Affairs, and she will be joined also by Alessandra Peruzzetto, joining online, Program Director for Archaeology at the Middle East World Monument Fund. Elisabetta?
Thank you, Lorena.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorena. Welcome back after the break. So we heard that this panel is about heritage-led international relations, and it's a concept that we heard also earlier this morning. But what do we mean with this exactly, and how is different, for instance, from cultural diplomacy? And for those of you who have been following ILUCIDARE for some time, maybe it's a familiar term, but for the others, we also prepared a short clip to explain the definition of heritage-led international relations that we developed over 3 years of research. And so maybe we'll start with this introduction. Please, the video.
Heritage-led international relations relies on heritage to foster social bonds and consolidate peace, social cohesion, and international cooperation. It is a mythology rather than a concept, which balances the interest of different entities, both international and local, to cultivate sustainable relationships. A multitude of concrete actions on the ground have taken place to build these links around heritage. Found out more on our ILUCIDARE to Learn YouTube channel.
So maybe it's a bit clearer now. We heard some keywords that also were mentioned earlier in this morning, such as making connections, cultivate relationship. It's a methodology rather than a concept, but who are the driving forces behind heritage-led international relations? Who are the main actors? So it's time now to grab your phone again for the people that are here in the room. For another Mentimeter to test you a bit. You can scan the QR code or go to www.menti.com and insert the code 6560415. And for the people that are joining us online, they can go on the right hand of the screen, and as before, the voting will appear. And the question is, who are the most prominent actors cultivating heritage-led international relations? And you have to rank between states, international organizations, cultural heritage institutions, heritage NGOs, civil society organizations, and education institutions such as academia or schools. So let's see if you got it right. Oh, exactly. So yes, I see that indeed non-state actors are the ones that came first, followed by international organization, education institution, and states at the list. And indeed, it reflects a bit what we have done in the project, because in ILUCIDARE, we really take the stand to focus on examples and actions carried out by what we call non-state actors. So civil society organization, academia and education institutions, and NGOs, and a bit less on what is like government or state-driven activities that are more reflected in the sphere of cultural diplomacy. And also in ILUCIDARE, we understand that heritage has been part of the international relations discourse for quite a long time. Heritage was even used by monarchs as a gift to establish relations between states, or by in the international organization to settle and to be considered, for example, during crisis or war times. But here in EULUCIDARE, we really take the stand of hearing from the people and from the bottom-up approaches. And this is in our research, but also in our capacity building activities. And as mentioned earlier this morning by Aziliz, we compiled quite good extensive examples in the EULUCIDARE display on international, in heritage-led international relations that is now live on our website. And you can also scan here in the QR code in the cards that you can find outside. But also, now let's hear from my colleague Alessandra, that's mentioned before. She's World Monument Fund is one of our 3 capacity building partners, and also from her experience as expert in a World Monuments Fund. So Alessandra, I think you are here online. Hello.
Yes.
Good morning.
Hi. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
So what are your findings or observations from your work in EULUCIDARE?
Yeah, well, it was it was very interesting, all these 2 years of project that we had together, and it was interesting also to see the results. I don't know if you can put them back, if it's possible. They were really interesting to see these results of the answers from the public, and because it's also what we did during the EULUCIDARE process. It was interesting to see that all with all our colleagues, we really worked with the different actors that have been mentioned and that you voted for, and cultural heritage institution and civil society organization were the one that really were on the top of our communication with the during the process, during the project. And World Monuments Fund is the same way that also World Monuments Fund is working. And in fact, one of the major values of World Monuments Fund, so we are, first of all, we are a non-governmental organization. We are a non-profit. We are based in New York. And one of our values is, in fact, is the people first approach, among other things. So really linking the place and with the communities is really an essential element of the collaboration that World Monuments Fund has when create a project. And this is important, really, as we can see also from the answer that there are different levels of communication when we have a project, and this happened during the EULUCIDARE program, and it's happened also when the World Monuments Fund in the field. And this one, in my experience, I work in the Middle East, and if we want just to speak about Iraq, is really how we are managing the project and how we really are also in the capacity building that we developed together in the Kurdistan region with the other EULUCIDARE partners. It was really trying to work with the academia, but the academia people we're working with, they will pass this advocacy and the knowledge that we exchange to with the advocacy program, awareness program that they will develop alone with the local people in the villages, in these small towns where they are working and where they are which they are responsible for. And also another thing that I would like to say is also that it was interesting to see also all the participants to the EULUCIDARE Prize, and in particular I would like just to mention the one Hiba Qassar, who is speaking later. I don't know Hiba in particular, but I know the team she's working with, and in particular Tel Mozan, the site in Syria she will speak about. It has been also a site that has been put on the World Monuments Fund watch list. That is an advocacy program that every 2 years is launched by World Monuments Fund. So it's also interesting to see this linkage that has been between World Monuments Fund programs on a side and the EULUCIDARE program through the prizes that was instituted with Europa Nostra, and it was really important for us, and in a way touching also to see how the young generations in Syria, despite the complication of the situation in the last years, are still advocating for the protection of their own heritage and of their culture. So this is really the points that we would like to explain as World Monuments Fund, and how we connect it to the EULUCIDARE program and to the policy also, the policy recommendation that have been prepared. So there is this really common and background between us and all the other partners that we had in the EULUCIDARE program.
Thank you, Alessandra. And indeed, you mentioned policy recommendations. This is another important output of the project that you will also find in our website, because also, as was mentioned before during the panel of heritage-led innovation, policymakers and public institutions at different governance level, at local, national, but also at European and international level, can play a very important role to support non-state actors in their endeavors. And again, I would like just to recall here a few points that summarize the key messages that we want to make. Also, making links with what has been said already this morning. We heard about raising awareness. And this is also a very important point, because even if there are many evidences of the contribution of heritage for international relations, peace, and social cohesion, it's still not fully understood. So initiatives like the ILUCIDARE Special Prizes or the ILUCIDARE Challenge that we'll hear about in a minute are really important opportunities to raise the awareness and to let this example be known and celebrated. Then another point is involving the local communities in the decision-making and implementation process. In ILUCIDARE, we really took this approach of putting the people first. And we also coined this motto, let's say, not for us, without us. And it's really a really key important message that we want to make to policymakers, not to plan programs and projects without really hearing from the voice and the needs of the beneficiaries. A third point is also like measures to connect what happens at local level with the international sphere through, for example, existing networks of museums. That is also an anticipation for an example that will be described later. And to really use the potential of networks for knowledge exchange and making international connections. And then the last point is, again, been mentioned several times, is build capacity of heritage practitioners to engage in international relations projects, but also to reach out to communities and to policymakers for policy advocacy. This is really important because sometimes practitioners are not sufficiently aware of the importance of their work, and they don't know how to communicate this and to make this really to highlight the impact of what they do and for their work. So speak out. And now I will give the floor to Joanna, the moderator of the panel, and she will introduce the case studies. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to show to you some concrete examples of how international relations can use or are using heritage. And today we selected two great projects for you. They are different in scope, different in size, and different in content, but they both received a ILUCIDARE Special Prize, so that's what they have in common, and also they are very, very important for international relations. So I would like to invite to the floor two people, and two people are online with us. First, I would like to ask Jamie Allan Brown, project manager from School of Art History, University of St. Andrews, who represents EULAC museums and communities. Last year, sorry, I was going to say today, this year's, but last year, ILUCIDARE Special Prize. We will have later on Hiba Qassar presenting Archaeology for Young Future. And I would like also to ask our coordinator, Aziliz, to come here. She will be giving some comments to the projects. And online we'll have Sanne Letschert from Prince Claus Fund, Head of Cultural Emergency Response, who will also give us some views, some comments on what's there in the projects in terms of cultural heritage-led international relations. So maybe let's start with EULAC museums. Would you please tell us something more about that project?
Yes, certainly. EULAC Museums is an international collaboration between 8 partners. Would you like me to start the presentation?
Yes, please.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. First, I just want to say thank you to ILUCIDARE, and it's a privilege to be here today. I'll try and speak very slowly. I realise I have quite a strong Scottish accent, so I'm very sorry about that. Yes, as you can tell, working in Latin America, it was also challenging for me as well and challenging for them. So let's begin. So as I said, my name is Jamie Allen Brown and I'm from the University of St Andrews. Let me just open today with a question. What is a community-based museum? This is the question that EULAC Museums has been researching through innovative practices since 2016. All cultural heritage professionals, volunteers and community leaders around the globe will share in the general sense of dismay that museums and heritage sites are sometimes perceived to be inaccessible to marginalised communities, such as Indigenous groups, young people, refugees, and people encountering conflict and natural disasters. The role of marginalised groups has to date been under-recognised for being not only important, but essential to sustainable heritage communities across Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, indeed globally. If we get the first video, please, if that's okay. Yep. There we go. Perfect. EULAC Museums is an international research project coordinated by the University of St Andrews, funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 programme. The basis of the project was that community-based museums allow underrepresented communities and groups to stake their place in history, as well as contributing towards environmental sustainability and community empowerment. As you can see on your screen here, we worked with over 154 countries, featuring over 108,000 people engaged in our activities, both online and in person. The official consortium consisted of 35 key people, from researchers to policymakers, with 8 project partners, including the University of Valencia, the National Museum of Archaeology in Lisbon, the University of the West Indies in the Caribbean, the Catholic University of Peru in Lima, the National Museum of Costa Rica, and, crucially, the International Council of Museums. But throughout each partner country and each network, a number of volunteer-based community networks supported the overall project ambitions to achieve its bi-regional exchange of experiences and knowledge to reinforce international relations, cultural understanding, and cooperation between Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean through a relationship built on trust and respect. Together, we sought to address 3 key themes. 1, community museums and sustainable development through innovative development workshops, understanding the methodology of museums as a tool for sustainable community development, such as our activities in the Trujillo region of northern Peru, where our initiatives were anchored in communities through our 4 archaeological museums, increasing local capacities. 2, community participation. Existing relations between museums, communities, and the project partners were strengthened, in part thanks to the participation of local agents in the development of long-term policies, support, and initiatives that benefit the communities involved. EULAC Museums facilitated the exchange of experts and community knowledge through our bi-regional youth exchanges, where Indigenous young people from Costa Rica and young people from Europe, in particular Northern Scotland in the Isle of Skye community and Northern Portugal, engaged in a 2-year programme and activities to contextualise their identity, their place within the world, and crucially empower themselves and their community. Finally, technology for innovation and crisis recovery. We worked alongside our project advisors, such as the Blue Shield trainer, Samuel Franco from Casa Cajom, a cultural research and rescue centre in Guatemala, and partners in Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. The project developed a virtual museum of community-identified objects, sharing the narrative from community perspectives. A key output for EULAC Museums was facilitating community-based museums to become a space for cultural empowerment and inclusion. The Mapuche communities in the Los Rios region of Chile reclaimed their difficult past and told their people's heritage through the interpretation and workshops that we planned. Across the Caribbean, the project's Enigma of Arrival exhibition led discussions on migration and gender perspectives, with a focus on reflections, response and resilience for the Windrush generation and the histories of migration from the Caribbean to the United Kingdom. EULAC Museums was not just a research project, but a community-based, bottom-up, grassroots-led movement to better understand the true transformative power of culture, addressing the past, but also recognising present-day realities, such as the Mapuche indigenous community in the Los Rios region of Chile. Encouraging our young people to get outside and engage with their local contexts, community and land, through intergenerational activities and sharing of knowledge, mapping local heritages, was crucial for our project. Even today, many of the engaged young people are still actively in contact with one another, representing the voice of young people in local decision-making processes, a key legacy success. Each stage of the project was fully consulted with local communities, addressing their own identified priorities. Although our grant has ended, the legacy of EULAC Museums continues through the community groups, associations and networks promoting their roots and ancestral knowledge via the shared project outputs and digital resources, showcasing the transformative power of culture. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions, just hold on to the end of the session because there will be a chance to ask all of them, or most of them. And now I would like you to listen to our online guest, who is Hiba Qassar, coordinator of the one-on-one project, Archaeology for a Young Future, another laureate of the ILUCIDARE Special Prize. Hiba, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me. I will speak on behalf of all the group for the AVASA and the International Institute of Mesopotamian Area Studies to speak about the Urkesh for Young Future. So Urkesh is one of the first cities in history, and it's located in the northeast of Syria, for those of you who doesn't know our context. And AVASA is a small research institute committed to the sharing dialogue and to through the past, based on the heritage and the past. Next slide, please. So the project started in 2017 and 2018 and included classes from Italy and Syria. The second edition was between Italy and Greece. However, due to COVID-19, we were not able to go on in the same way. The project targeted youngsters aged between 12 to 16 years old. Next slide, please. So when COVID started, we modified the project into its new form, the one-on-one, to adapt to the new safety measures. So students from, and we started a group from Syria, Italy, and Greece. Students between 12 to 14 met on a one-on-one base after a long formation and reflection on what's the meaning of heritage for them and how they would like to present it to their peers in the other country or somebody who know nothing about their culture. The meetings took place under our supervision and they were designed as a journey. So students started talking about their heritage first, then about themselves in present, and then their future aspiration or what they would like to do or what they can share as global citizens. Next slide, please. So what we are really doing is to promote dialogue via culture and by empowering youngsters. And when we started, we have the difficulty of we were doubtful. We didn't know what results we will get, because we are putting in touch people coming from the Middle East, from areas with war, and students and participants from Europe, Italy, who are living their normal life. So we were a little bit afraid on how this will impact the youngsters. The results were really surprising, and we learned also by doing it, what does it mean to empower the youngsters by using cultural heritage. Next slide, please. So what the outcomes that we are having, I would like here to share the words of the participants themselves. It's in new ways to share the cultural heritage and really be able to share what we always called a shared heritage. And here I would like to bring the words of Lana, 14 years old. She said, "This program helped me to find the courage and confidence to speak about my culture and heritage." Next slide, please. Build bridges through the culture. Here are the words of Julia from Italy, saying, "I learned how to relate to a foreign girl, share aspects of her life as a girl, and to be interested in a culture that's completely different than mine." I hope I said the same word because I wasn't able to read them. Next slide, please. Connect through heritage. Here I would like, there are the words of Hero, who said, "I realized even though there are millions of kilometers between us, we still feel and understand each other. I feel that one of the goals of these ruins is to connect the world from different races and nationalities." Next slide, please. So what's next? What we are doing next is to include even students from the elementary school to start this experience. They connect. We have a class from Syria who connected with peers from USA at a very young age. And whenever language is not good enough to do this dialogue, they use other forms of culture like music. So students were trying to speak, but whenever they were not able really to express who they are, they play. And here are the photos of the last trip to the site, to Tel Mozan, ancient Urkesh, where students started to play, to interact with the site, to really feel this connection between them and this ancient heritage that usually is missing in Syria, and then also be able to transform what they felt to their peers in the USA. And next slide, please. In the next months, we're having also students from Palestine, Gaza, from Spain, USA, Greece, and Italy who will be on board. So for next autumn, we are planning on including more students from middle schools and elementary schools. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for showing us your achievements. They are great indeed. And for those of you who are interested in more examples of international heritage-led international relations, I encourage you to visit, first of all, the Europa Nostra website with the shortlisted candidates for the ILUCIDARE special prizes, where we have a number of videos and information about other projects that were great as well. Also, you might want to see our international relations display, which features also the projects and the initiatives that were done throughout ILUCIDARE project. And maybe you want to browse also through our interactive inspirational kit, which showcases projects in innovation and international relations and tells you more about the project we discovered throughout the years of the ILUCIDARE project. And I just want to mention one project which is both shortlisted for the prize, and it's also featured in the international inspirational kit, because I find it particularly relevant in those turbulent times that we have now, which is a project on shared heritage. And thank you, Hiba, for giving this term to us, to reminding us that there is such thing as shared heritage across borders. And there is a project done by Technical Committee on Cultural Heritage, which was established by Greek and Turkish Cypriots to recognize, promote, restore diverse heritage of Cyprus, which, as we know, is sadly divided still. And they work together, and I think that it's a great way to show that heritage can be a tool for fostering reconciliation and dialogue and peace. So hopefully one day we can see that also in Ukraine. And now I would like to turn to our commentators. One of them is Sanne Letschert, and I would like her to give her impressions on what she's heard to date.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much for having me today, and thanks for the fantastic presentations, Hiba and Jamie. It was really nice to learn more from your projects. My name is Sanne Letschert. I'm head of the Cultural Emergency Response Program of the Prins Claus Fund, which is a first aid program for cultural heritage under threat. So we provide quick and flexible financial support, but also expertise to help local actors safeguard their heritage in crisis situations. And what stood out for me today in these projects is that there's so much hidden powers actually that heritage has, which are very often not yet that recognized, or not as recognized as we would want to. We, with this audience and this people and these speakers, we all really see them, and we see what heritage can do and what it can lead to, like intercultural interaction, interdisciplinary cooperation, but also social cohesion and peace building. And those are all beautiful, almost intangible, ungraspable powers that heritage has. And you see that really clearly in the projects that were presented, but I also see it every day in the projects that we support for culture when it's under threat, and the length that people take to actually protect their heritage and culture. And we're seeing it now every day in Ukraine, also in the projects that we are supporting, how people are actually, willing to risk their lives to protect their collections and sites and spaces, because it's also about where people can come together and where they can interact. But what I do see, and that's also, I think, what these projects point out, and what the ILUCIDARE project also points out, is that there's also still some steps that we can make as a sector in making that more visible, and making a stronger case for the role that heritage can play in intercultural relations and cultural diplomacy as well. So what we are also trying with the cultural emergency response is see how we can strengthen the infrastructure of our field as a whole, by engaging in longer term relationships and not just one-off projects, but see if we can work with people together on the ground that are close to the communities, to the crisis, to the heritage, and work with them to build long-lasting partnerships. So I was very happy to see that also our Cultural Rescue Center in Guatemala with Samuel took part in the EULAC project, because that's one of the first pilot projects where we are trying to work on a regional level and see how we can improve the infrastructure of heritage protection, but also capacity building and engaging with other types of stakeholders that also need to come on board, like municipalities, but also governments, of course. What that also leads to, I think, is that we can make the heritage sector more inclusive, because if there's more a stronger infrastructure for it, it will also be easier to set up projects that are fully locally led, and we are as funding organizations merely a supporter, and kind of dissolving ourselves is of course the ideal where we are working towards. In the end, I also think it's more sustainable way of approaching heritage projects on the long term. And a second thing I think we can do is to better share the stories that we have to tell on the successes of heritage projects, like the ones we have seen presented today. The impact that they have, not only on the sites or the collections or the heritage they are engaging with, but also on the communities, kind of the trickle down effect. And I cannot tell you how we are doing that, because we're also figuring that out, but I think we can really see how we can work together as a sector to better demonstrate the impact that we are making, to see how we can gather more data, to also convince those policymakers and those states who we are now seeing completely at the bottom, as we saw of the stakeholder importance quiz that we did, but they're actually very important in backing us up, in supporting us, and also help us canalize more funding towards this field, because in the end, it's still a sector, I think, that could really benefit from more funding and more structural supports as well. And I think something beautiful that we see with those hidden powers that heritage has is how people are connected through it. And that even though the projects were very different, and especially also in the quotes I think that Hiba shared, it's so visible how people can find common ground in talking about their heritage and about their culture. And that's a very powerful something that we cannot underestimate. And the impact, I think, that heritage projects have is therefore also quite the same all over the world. Whoever we ask, is that this significance is there for a lot of people. And I think, and that's something that we also truly believe as an organization, that's because culture is a basic need and heritage is in the end really about people. And that's something we should definitely not forget. So thank you for making that very visible also in the projects that were presented today.
Thank you very much. And Aziliz, what do you think?
Wow, yeah, I'm thinking a lot.
Not bad.
Yeah, so thank you, Joanna, for the floor. And thank you both Hiba and Jamie, of course, to present the projects. Yeah, I think I'm firstly very proud that both of you are here and winners of the EULAC Special Prize for Heritage-led International Relations. We had several more candidates, but I am happy that you guys won. And like Joanna said, I think it's interesting to see, of course, also the difference between the two projects. Because what we hear from Hiba, what I like about it, it's very low budget, it's super bottom up. It's basically connecting groups of children online, having them talk about what they think is their heritage. When talking with the team of Avasa, I mean, it was also interesting to hear that in the beginning it was different for the children to even start talking to each other. So first they talked about, you know, what they eat, what are games they play, and then eventually they got to heritage. And I think if I look then at your project, what is happening, which is a big EU-funded project, Horizon 2020, between different countries, both in the LAC region as well as in the EU. Of course, it's big. I mean, the surface area, if you look at the map, it's incredible. But then I understand that the way that you work are, again, more local projects with children on the ground. And I think that is the power of the thing, to bring children same age together. But as I understand from both projects, and this is something that you will find in our policy recommendations and our display as well, some of the key factors, or what really helps in if you want to set up any project, is shared heritage. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that was common in both of the winning projects, and it definitely is something that comes back in the policy recommendations. And I think in extension, if you look at what we've been doing in EULAC, it's also coming back. We did a lot of capacity buildings, as all of you know by now. And I want to say again, thank you so much to our three incredible capacity building partners. We saw Alessandra from World Monuments Fund before, but I also really want to mention we have here in the room with us Fausto Cardoso and Marita from the University of Cuenca in Ecuador, and also Cultural Heritage Without Borders Kosovo is here. And just getting back to the shared heritage thing, it worked really well for what we did in the Western Balkans as well. Just working on a type of vernacular architecture that you can find in a cross-border region. We really succeeded in bringing local NGOs together, having people talk for the first time, even though we have been dealing with same types of buildings, literally a few kilometers from apart. So that's a nice message, and I thank you for applying and winning and really showcasing that. But I also want to put a small, I don't want to be negative, but a small maybe question or remark, something that I picked up on. So as scientific coordinator, I mean, we've done, I hope I'm doing it right, 22, 25 trainings all over the world. We went to the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa. We were in Latin America, the Western Balkans, of course. And I already mentioned it to you, Jamie. Sometimes I found it difficult that, especially when you come in with money as an external person, when you talk about heritage-led international relations, I think it's important to not forget you're working with heritage communities. You enter there as an expert. Maybe you're the donor themselves. I find that if you do this type of projects on the ground, there is a big question in ethics, both in terms of you easily can cause power asymmetries. I found it also, and we are very, very happy in the ILUCIDARE project. We have a great ethics advisor also present here with us today, and we went through several ethics communities before we even tried to do our activities on the ground. Why was this important? We know that we are external and we can never even pretend to know what the heritage means to local communities. So whatever we do on the ground will always be external. And of course, we want to help, we want to do capacity buildings, we want to set up knowledge exchanges. But what I find vital in any project is, to have this under consideration. And I think it's great to hear that all the work that Sanne is doing, of course, as well. But I think it's a big explanation mark that we should also put there. Heritage can move a lot, can bring us together, but please keep this ethics in the back of your mind. Maybe that's a message that I wanted to give.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like now to open the floor to any questions that you might have to our... Yes, please. We have one question there.
So thank you very much for your presentations and the contributions from the projects. I'm Mario Santella. I'm a professor at Carleton University and Secretary General of ICOMOS. I have a question about shared heritage, because it seems that shared heritage, we say shared heritage and everything is okay, no? But are we with these programs imposing heritage? And that's actually one of my questions. Do you have any mechanisms? Because Sanne was talking about inclusiveness and Alessandra was talking before, and nice to see Alessandra. We worked together a long time ago. And what are the mechanisms to make not imposing but sharing? What do you think?
Can I?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think that's a fantastic question, and I should be honest. Obviously, I'm here representing the entire consortium of over multiple organisations and universities, but that's a fantastic question in particular. I think that's something that, coming from Europe, obviously working in a developing world and obviously in particular in Latin America, we attempted to be fully, basically to offer full participation. And what I mean by that is full consultation throughout every process. So what you were saying about, are we imposing that heritage coming in from Europe and going working with indigenous communities in particular, only taking one narrative from the National Museum? We tried not to do that. And how I mean by that is we met with the community elders of these communities, but also asked their opinion on how certain aspects of the project should be ran and operated, how we should run certain activities, how we can interpret their heritage. But crucially, we involved them throughout that whole process. So there was a facilitator from the National Museum, for example, in Costa Rica, but additionally, there was a community elder who was volunteering up their time to be part of this whole process and giving us their expertise and liaising their narrative of their own heritage. And I think that's crucial, is that you have to have that community buy-in and community participation from day one. And how we were able to do that in EULAC museums is each of the partners that we had in our consortium were selected because they had an existing network of voluntary community organisations that wanted to be part of something bigger and wanted to really, not just be the receiving of a donor bringing in money, but it was essentially built on participation and a kind of love for heritage. And I do think it has to be done from day one of a project, is that full consultation has to take place. So that's from my perspective. So, yeah. Okay.
Hiba, would you like to comment on that as well?
Sorry, it was for me, right? The question.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Well, actually, again, thank you very much for this question, especially when it comes to Syria or Palestine or countries in the Middle East. The relationship with what is generally perceived as heritage is not really quite clear, because what is heritage for the West is very much related to archaeological site and everything that comes from out of the ground. But for local societies, it's not heritage, it's just materials that happens to come out of the ground next to them. So building a relationship with these materials and then be able to use these materials to build also relationship with other cultures was a real challenge. And I should say that our methodology was first by going pretty cautious and trying not to impose anything. Also, that's why through the program we have various phases, and we start what we called phase 0, in which we try to understand their own perception to these materials and how do they feel about it, and what do they, if they think it's relevant or not, and if they think it's not, what can we do to make it relevant, and if they're interested in so. And then another thing we noticed that whenever you use this material to talk about yourself, so we try to encourage them to not find direct links, because it's not always easy to find direct links, but more to how can you present yourself through these materials? Do you think this can be done to other cultures? And whenever they started to the meetings by talking about these materials and their peers were interested, suddenly these materials had another impact on them. And it was something so valuable that they have and they are able to share. So whenever they were able to share it, this was the first moment when they really created this sense, the beginning of sense of ownership. It's not really so strong at the beginning. I mean, we don't want to fool ourselves. Those are still kids. They have 12 to 16 and they have a lot that's going on in their life. But being able to use these to construct something, to show who they are, to talk about themselves, gave these materials another dimension, another value than just being historically important or archaeologically important. So that was our methodology to create this, let's say, to turn archaeology into heritage.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I know you wanted to comment some, Aziliz, a bit.
Maybe Sanne first.
Sanne, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. And I think this is a spot-on question, actually, and also something we always consider before starting a project as well. What I think, and Hiba also said, is most important to realize is there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So even if you come with a project idea, it's not gonna work in same in different countries in the same way, or not even with different communities. So I think a flexible and open attitudes for a dialogue in actually already shaping the project is very important to start with, which is also why we are really making an effort to decentralize what we are doing to the regions where also training programs, for example, that are designed for an international audience can be adapted to regional priorities, because they will differ, well, per community, per country, actually, which is also why it is important what Jamie said, is that it's not only national narratives or national recognized heritage, for example, are taken into account, but it's very important to also work from a more grassroots level and see where communities define their priorities. So I would say flexibility and a very open mind are really crucial to truly have shared heritage projects.
Thank you.
I would like to make one addition. So yes, of course, wonderful question. The things I heard are definitely true, but I would like to make a short reflection again, from ILUCIDARE, obviously. So I think in the display we are quite not blunt, but open about it. I mean, we've done our background research, and we are not afraid, and we also say it, that shared heritage, I mean, it has been associated by experts with no colonialism as well. I mean, we have to be very blunt about it. It can become something like that. So the question is relevant. For us in the portfolio, let's call it, of all the international relation activities we did, again, we were lucky because some of our capacity building partners are local NGOs or institutions who have been working with local communities for years and years. So there we can have confidence and trust that they're really okay. They know the priorities, they know the way of thinking, what is needed. But then we also had a group of what we call capacity buildings, where we were literally the odd dog out, like literally, I mean, going to sub-Saharan Africa, entering in a country, trying to understand what could be interesting to do a capacity building about here. And at times I felt really silly being there and just pretending, let's do a project here, and trying to find out what those people want, because yes, of course, eventually you can go and you can talk to the chief of tribe and visit certain heritage sites which are very sacred to them. But then the question is also the experts who are from the country that you find that bring you to the chief of tribe and that speak the knowledge is in a country where you have 72 ethnicities, where the central government is literally imposing a very central policy trying to eradicate those ethnicities. So if you then go on site with a local expert from a government institution, then can you truly say that you're still talking about their heritage? Like, these are also considerations that you need to take that I find very important. Again, something that we highlight, Elisabetta said it, our catchphrase is not for us, without us. Like, if you do not truly value our heritage for the value that we give to it, and you just come here with donor money, then don't even pretend to be talking about heritage-led international relations. Then you're here to flag your own banner, your own identity, not ours. So that's definitely important. And just to what I find important is the main resource to set up project on shared heritage, to set up project on international relations, for me, is time. Like I said, our other capacity building partners, they've had years and years of working there with local communities. You need time, you need to cultivate a relationship. You cannot just fly in with a bunch of money and pretend that you're doing something, because then, you have ego issues, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point, obviously. Any other questions? There's one question there.
Thank you. I'm Greta Galeazzi. I work for the European Commission DG for International Partnerships in the Culture Unit. I would have one question more maybe for the project implementers. You worked a lot with young people. Schools have been kind of mentioned, but not too much in detail. Maybe you can expand a bit on how you work with the more formal education system, challenges working with teachers. These are also things that were kind of shared a bit in the very first intervention in Lisbon, the difficulty of making teachers work with heritage. I'm curious about your perspectives from the field. And the second one, maybe it's more for the ILUCIDARE scientific people. What about diaspora in heritage-led international relations? Do you have examples? Do you have projects? Kind of feels a bit of a blind spot so far. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, again, that's a fantastic question. And in terms of myself, I was the youth researcher for the project, so this was my field. In terms of our bi-regional youth exchange programme that operated over 2 years, we had 3 countries involved: Scotland, Costa Rica and Portugal. Within the Scottish context, our curriculum was actually designed, the new curriculum, which is called Curriculum for Excellence, encourages other agencies or other projects or other universities, in our case in St Andrews, to be involved in the kind of overall education programmes. So we approached the local high school there's only one high school in the island community we worked in, and it was in the Portree area of the Isle of Skye. We met with the principal teacher and basically explained the project and got their thoughts and opinions on what we envisaged the project being like. We then adapted our programme slightly and our methodology and worked with another kind of community organisation, so it wasn't just the school really, it was a community organisation called the Staff and Trust, which is a local community decision-making body. They apply for funding to run community groups or to build a community centre, that type of thing. We consulted them, and they also have a unique aspect in terms of heritage. Within this community, there is the Gaelic culture, which is a local language in Scotland as well, whereby there's part of the process of recruiting the young people, they had to speak this local language as well as English. In terms of Costa Rica, we worked with the local indigenous high schools primarily. That was identified through the National Museum, so we didn't actually contact them directly through the government. It was facilitated through an existing contact of the National Museum. And in Portugal, we worked with 3 individual schools and 3 individual museums, and the reason for that was each of the museums identified existing links with that school. If I'm honest, as a youth worker, it's incredibly difficult to get that connection to a high school or to get a connection to a school, but we were thankful the fact that we had access to those existing networks and to get that connection to the school. And that is how we were able to achieve what we did for the EULAC Museums Youth Exchange. Yeah.
Hiba?
Well, as what has been said before, we have very, very limited budget, and really 1 or 2 people are working on the project. So we don't have a homogeneous way of getting in touch with schools or students. So we decide based on what's more convenient and what the opportunity offers us. For example, in the USA, we have a connection with a school teacher who adopted the project and decided that all her students would like to participate. So we are having a school through the connection of the student. Same in Syria. When it comes to other countries like Italy, schools are extremely overwhelmed, and students and teachers. So we are getting in touch with the students individually, and with the proof of their parents are participating. As for and the scope of so far, the goal of the program wasn't to have really anything in the school textbooks or the curricula. So it was more about bringing people together and maybe try to find a way on how they can get in touch, be engaged with their own heritage. Although now that we are having Gaza on board and they're asking us on the methodology to go, so we are planning on maybe writing a more systematic way and methodological way on how to approach the program and how to deal with each community based on our experiences, of course.
Yes, thank you very much. Anyone else would like to pose a question?
If we don't have any more questions here, we will maybe look at the other room to see if there are questions over there. No questions? Yeah, please go ahead. And then we have one last question from the online audience.
Okay, thank you very much for all the food for thought you've been sharing throughout the day. I'm Miruna Gaman, European Australian intern and PhD student in Cultural Studies. My question relates to dissonant heritage because I find it a very fascinating topic, and I have the feeling that a lot of times it's being a bit shoved under the rug because of the powerful negative connotations it has and the oftentimes traumatic past that it implies, that it carries with it. So I'm wondering, and I'm not necessarily asking for a complete answer, we can discuss it throughout the day. To what degree can descendant heritage be a catalyst for fruitful international relations, and what would be an approach to use it? Thank you. This is for the whole panel, and if anybody has any ideas, feel free to shout. Thank you.
Yes.
I can give an example. Actually, it's not primarily from the EULAC Youth Exchange. It's more from the EULAC Museum's migrations and gender context within working with our partners in Barbados and Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. The Windrush generation, as you may know, is the Caribbean migration to the United Kingdom, was an incredibly difficult situation for young people to discuss in the Caribbean context. We had an exhibition called The Enigma of Arrival, whereby young people and communities were invited to, take part through artists and to interpret that, history of the challenging of the people obviously migrating to the UK and then being forced to come back to go back to the Caribbean due to government policy. Young people were encouraged to do a performance of this as well and to talk about these issues, and this performance was documented at one of our EULAC Museums events, whereby people were encouraged to kind of witness through dramatic performance and interpretation about what happened with people during that time. And it was, obviously this wasn't the key aspect I was involved in, but certainly it was one of the key outputs of our project. And it was now part of an exhibition that went on tour across the UK, into St Andrews in Scotland and to Reading in England as well. There was plans to have this online exhibition to go across the Caribbean as well, which we're still hoping will happen as well. So that's a kind of a key example from EULAC Museums about kind of contested and the type of history.
Thank you. Anyone else from the panel would like to comment on that?
Loaded topic.
Yeah. Okay, so we can go on to the next question. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our online audience for their questions. We will pick up one more for this panel. In this time, it concerns the role of cultural education in shaping educational curricula in schools. So the question is, do you consider cultural institutions should be involved in any way in this process? And if so, do you have good examples?
Maybe let's start with Hiba, if she has any ideas now.
I think that it depends on what we would like to do with culture. I mean, lately we are seeing examples from different, it's not only about the European heritage, it's about global heritage, right? It's about what we would like to do with these archaeological sites, cultural sites, and how can we, is it a priority really to protect them, to investigate in them? Do we really believe in that? If we do, I guess they should be included in the curriculum in schools, and not only just in a formative way. It's not just about learning about their value. It's more about activating their role. It's more about bringing them to life in all the ways that we can and all the efforts that are needed to do so. Otherwise, I believe, especially from my own experience being a Syrian, they will just be lost in a way or another, even by neglect or by other ways, but they will be lost. So I believe it's really a need, and we have to do that. It's a necessity for us who are working in this sector to bring these and to find ways to include it in a way or another in school textbooks and activities. It's not simple, it's really complicated. I tried that, but I think it's a necessity. It's no more a choice, an option, sorry. So that's where I think.
Thank you, Hen. How about you, Jamie? Do you have any?
I agree entirely. I think it's a necessity. I mean, in terms of our own experience at EULAC Museums, our community museums in Costa Rica, the local schools and education services actively use the community museum as a place for young people to learn about textiles and learn about craftsmanship. but also to understand how people could use those skills and those capacities to make an income and to start businesses and entrepreneurship activities as well. But certainly, yes, I think it's a necessity that museums can be used as a space for not just museums, but museums and heritage communities can be used in a way that we wouldn't traditionally think would be the use of role of a museum in terms of sustainable development as well and health issues as well, which has happened in our EULAC Museums project. So I think it's about the changing definition of museum and how we need to encourage not just education services, but other obviously sectors as well, including health services and agriculture as well.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just maybe a very small addition, again, a bit the devil's advocate, I guess, from the experience that we have in the project. Like in one of the areas that we were planning a capacity building, the idea was to give a training on cleaning and restoring cave paintings that are centuries old. And it really struck me that at a certain moment, after some climbing in a cave painting, you have like it's very beautiful. I mean, the drawings, century old, like kind of stick fingers, and then you had this in the bottom a little graffiti of a stick finger man. Like next to it, literally. This was done by a young fellow in the community, obviously, and it struck me then like, okay, it's vandalism, but he's also kind of, you know, trying to leave his mark from his generation next to these century-old stick finger men cave paintings. So thinking about it then, when I hear this, they would never listen to cultural institution in that country. They have a distrust to any government organization. So, I mean, public museums, institutions, I guess it's about in what region of the world we are talking, but in some regions, this would cause more distrust than something else. It's maybe also something to take into account. But yeah, and then you have a project like Tiago presented as well. I mean, maybe it's also about the ways that you involve what is in the collections in museums, or the project presented by Fabio. So it's maybe, it doesn't have to be in the museum, but it can be with objects of the museum by other people, something like that. Because sometimes there is just distrust to anything to do with government.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the relations between education and heritage, we have a section on that in the inspiration kit, so we kindly encourage you to go through it as well. If we don't have Sanne, would you like to say some last few words? Okay, so I would like to thank the panel for the interesting and very lively contribution to our meeting today. So thank you very much for your presence here.
Thank you very much to our panelist and moderator, and also to you for the interesting questions and for the reflection on challenges and methodologies for international relations based in heritage, but also I think the very powerful illustration of how cultural heritage can build bridges between individuals, communities, countries, and continents. So with this very positive note, I would now announce a time for a celebration. We had last Playground, last December here in Brussels, launched an ILUCIDARE Challenge, which is an international competition rewarding creative ideas and change makers. So we have had a proud winner coming all the way from Jamaica. So I now give the floor to Philippe Kern, founder and managing director of Kia European Affairs, to introduce us to the winning project and tell us more about the challenge. Thank you, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Lorena. Hi, everybody. As we are going out announcing winners, obviously we have first to give some announcement of gratitude and thanks. So I'm not going to thank the father or the mothers, but I'm going to thank first the European Union and the European Commission, without which there would not be such a program, 3-year program, into looking into how cultural heritage contributes to innovation, international relations. So I think we need to emphasize this, especially in our time where this is always put into question. The second thanks I'd like to give is to KU Leuven, to Koen, to Aziliz as scientific coordinator, because without them, we wouldn't have had this consortium. They would have worked 3 years on this project. And my third gratitude would be actually going to the KEA staff, Clémentine, Elisabetta, and also Allan, because we were responsible for organizing those playgrounds, and I was always impressed by the outcome of those outputs of those playgrounds and the concept they were developed through those playgrounds. So I finished on the gratitude side. Before I announce and I introduce the winner, and to create a bit of tension, you know, who is the winner, how does she look like, you know, blah, blah. I'd like to put maybe this also into context, because we're always here to try to justify investment in culture and the relationship between cultural heritage and policy making. And what came out of this, we really identified that cultural heritage is a resource for innovation, for intercultural dialogue, for international relations. This morning we were told also it's a resource for civic pride. It's a resource for emotional connection. It's a resource for dreams. A dream that enables you then to take actions, that stimulate people to take action. And I think we were also told by Aziliz this morning that the world today is faced with global challenges, you know, climate change, wars now, threat to biodiversity, pandemics, health pandemics. And the idea is to not only look cultural resource as a resource to addressing those challenges, but to see how you people working in cultural heritage are actually agents of transformation. Because what's clearly come out in the narrative of our discussion is that you are engaging with communities, you are engaging with people, you are trying to them to think differently, to change their mindset, to change their behaviors. And we all know that if we want to address the global challenge we mentioned earlier, we have to change behavior, we have to address communities, we have them make conscious that they are also the enactors of the changes that are required to make life sustainable on this given planet. And so I'd like you to think in terms of yourself not only as project manager, but think as agent of transformation. And this leads me to the introduction of the winner, because we have truly here an agent of transformation, in the sense that our winner is working in a small community in Jamaica, in St. Elisabeth. She's into community engagement. She's trying to get the people to understand the value of the local heritage and work with those people to change their perception, their mindsets. And therefore, I'm very pleased to give this wonderful framed to concretize the achievement to Georgia Love, and Georgia will have the opportunity to present her case much better than I've just done. But please, a round of applause to Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, well, I think I have this. This is very, very exciting for us. Thank you, Philippe. When I was reflecting, it's about the winning, but even more so, I feel like we have received an invitation to be part of a community. You know, I was saying to one of my colleagues last night, when you're the little group working hard, you can feel like you're the only crazy ones with the crazy ideas. And then you come to Brussels and you realize that there's a whole room full of other crazy people who think that you can do exciting things with cultural heritage. So it is our absolute pleasure to be here and to accept the invitation to be part of this community and to contribute to it and to benefit from it. So thank you very much. And also thank you for the clicker. Oh, thank you. For the opportunity to share a bit about the project. Let me just see if it comes up. Oh, yeah, there it is. Can't see it fully. Right, perfect. So in looking at some of the resources that came out of out of the LUCIDARE project, I decided to frame some of the key points about our project using the notion of a roadmap. And the roadmap is going to lead us ultimately to a Caribbean living museum of traditional historic buildings for cultural and economic renewal in rural Jamaica. So that's the long game. That's what we're trying to get to. And I will share a few points along our roadmap so far. I'm an 80s baby too. I'm pre-Google Maps in many ways. So I realize the value of a map because it gives you a big picture. It keeps you creative in thinking about, I can get to where I want to go, but from several different directions. So it's not an automated voice that's telling you, go left, go right, go this way. And we are building the plane while we're flying it. We're working it out. And so the long game is to create this living museum. It does not exist now, but it will. And I want to share with you a few of the things that have gotten us here so far and our vision for what this living museum will look like. So we have configured our dream team. Our dream team is 7 people coming from many different disciplines. We have some architects, we have teachers. I come from a community development background. We have a business and investment professional. And we've all come together and said, we want to do this. How can we do it together? How can we make the most of the resources that we have internally and draw on those resources externally? So we are multidisciplinary, we're definitely passionate, and we are learning every day how to collaborate more and more together. So we've been organizing since 2018. We are now officially registered. There are many grassroots organizations that don't have official registrations, but we have taken that leap, especially because we're dealing with things like land and essentially setting up a whole institution. So we are formally registered under Jamaican laws and nonprofit. But even though this dream team works very well, we know for sure we would not have gotten here without collaborators. We have technical advisors, so people who aren't officially part of our collective, but who have contributed substantively in helping us make connections, in attracting resources, all of which have been very critical to getting us here. So our collective is growing, and we are looking forward to inviting many of you in this room. I was picking Joe's brain last night. I'm like, this built documentation thing, because we are wanting to improve our inventory about the buildings. How can we learn more? So we are going to use our personal fuel. What are the things that drive us as individuals? And like Jamie, I have the challenge of being the only representative, but I'm trying to represent 7 diverse voices. And these are images of us. And these are some of the things that they've described as the driving forces for why are we doing this personally. We are, and which is part of why Trevor's message about civic pride. Jamaicans are very proud people. I don't know how many people know Jamaicans in this room, but we are the people who show up in our flag, we are very proud people. And so it is a desire to maintain that pride and continue to foster it, because we see it as a driving force for helping us to continue to stake our claim as a small island in a big world. So the past is the lamp in the night, this source of healing, a development of a sense of self. These are all the kinds of ideas that drive us as individuals, and which ultimately feed into our mission. How do we do the work? Because we use that personal to preserve the traditional arts and crafts, and we're using the preservation of the traditional building methods in this particular region, but ultimately we want to expand to Jamaica. So we're focused in a very local area right now, but we are looking at vernacular buildings across the island as an important marker of what does it mean to be Jamaican? What are the things can we learn from these buildings about Jamaica more generally? So the second point on our roadmap is that we have to decide what's our common dream. So we've decided to focus on the buildings. So we're saving the vernacular buildings, And Spanish wall is the type of building methodology that we're focused on right now. So if you look at that building in the right, it looks like a very sad building right now, doesn't it? There's a whole tree growing in there, and in the inset you can see that that's the possibility of what it could look like. That's another building that's being used as a shop. And so for lots of other people, they see a waste of space, they see a sign of poverty. We see opportunity. We see a bridge to the past. We see symbols of Jamaican resilience and ingenuity. We see untapped economic opportunity. And all of this will be the foundation of the Caribbean Living Museum. So the buildings will be restored from this and look more like that is the hope. All right, and that's our famous little building. So what is Spanish Wall? Just so we're clear, because and it's kind of funny that it's called Spanish Wall, colonialism, thank you. What is Spanish Wall? So essentially it's limestone that is layered with earth and lime mortar, and it's in a wooden frame, right? So that's the method that's been used for this specific building that we're looking at. Another vernacular style that we're interested in, but we're not actively preserving right now, is wattle and daub, and it uses that weaving and again the earth mortar as for the plaster. So that's a building method that we're preserving, and so all the buildings in our museum will be primarily focused on this kind of methodology. All right. So the next part in our map is that we know who we are. We've configured our team, and now we are figuring out what our approach is. And our approach includes three main ways. We're going to be using heritage education. We're developing this museum, and we're configuring what that means. And we're wanting to continue the research about the natural materials that are used in the building. Do we know as much as we can about what we can do with lime? So we want to continue to kind of bounce between all three of these things in terms of helping it to make sense for us as an entity, but the community as well. That we want to use this information to enrich the current knowledge, but the future knowledge as well. And we've also had to think about what makes our museum special. So we are archiving the information, the building skills, in an effort to establish what's the context of these buildings, the connections, what can we learn about the construction history of the buildings. But definitely it's about the context and understanding the buildings in the social context. So we want to document and archive that. We want to expand the knowledge. So an important part of our concept too is that we're decentralizing. So there will be a main campus, but we also want to encourage owners of these buildings who don't currently recognize the value of them to say, do you understand how you can restore them? Do you understand how you can improve on this building and incorporate it as a feature in what's offered through our living museum? And then finally, we want to stimulate the environment for the economic, using it as a resource for economic growth. So restoring the buildings, but how do we repurpose them? How do we repurpose them and incorporate them into our current existence and make it relevant for our lives now? And as simple as the technology is, it's solid science in terms of how these buildings were made in the past. Is that you made a huge lime kiln, and you figured out the lime cycle in order to harness the resources, the natural resources, for the purposes of the building. So we are celebrating the creativity of our people in terms of using the natural resources, and demonstrating that this is solid science, it can be sustainable, and we can incorporate the ways of the community in this process, right? And we hope that when you come to visit our museum, I think there's a video that we'll show now, that you will see something like this. A lime kiln that's been built, that you may stay and see it being burnt, and you'll understand a little bit more. So it's not just reading something, but you would have had an experience with something like a lime kiln that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. And we've been testing our approach. So how did we get here? We haven't built the museum yet, but we will. But there are lots of steps. I appreciated Azili's comment about time. Have to be patient. And some of the things that we've been doing over the last few years are, the Heritage Education started out with a documentary. We filmed the lime kiln being burnt. We created a film out of that, and we've promoted that, and that has been the way we've started the conversation. We've had heritage and summer camps for children. We've created community murals. A virtual art auction last year, which went extremely well for fundraising, because that's the next piece, is figuring out how to fund all of this. And collaboration, the ongoing need for collaboration. That's how we've been developing the concept around the museum and making connections with different groups of people. Major thing that we did last year was that we've deconstructed or disassembled an old Spanish wall building, and we've rescued it, and we will be restoring it this year on a new piece of land. So we've moved it from its old place and taken it to a new place, and it's going to go back up before the end of this year, all things being equal. And this just gives you a picture of some of the transitions of that. And so ultimately, when we do have the museum set up, we are hoping to have things like a heritage trail, where you see the campus would be right there, but it would incorporate not just one or campus, but the restored buildings that we want to collaborate with other people. So you could be walking for 5 kilometers, learning more about the stories of these buildings and their homes and their families and the context of those buildings where they are, because we always want to restore the building where it is. We don't want to have to keep rescuing buildings and taking them to our campus. That's not sustainable. And yeah, these are just images of how we imagine our community engagements to continue. This person right here in the construction hat is our master builder, is Guy Parchment. He is the one who has been teaching us a lot about the buildings and the building methodology. We want to be able to have young people, old people, whoever, to talk to somebody like Guy, because he is a character. Trevor talked about humor. You won't just get the story about, okay, you put the stone here, you're gonna get it over drinks, you're gonna get laughs, it's going to be engaging and therefore more memorable. And there's Guy again. So our campus, we imagine, our dream looks something like this. It will have a restored shop, it will have lookout points, it will have a lime kiln, it will have farm-to-table experiences. We want to host artists in some of these repurposed buildings. That's the vision of that this space will be something that will be integrated into the life of the community, and that it will ultimately serve for heritage tourism in that part of the country as well. So we are ready. We are so ready. We're ready for the next phase. We're going to be reassembling the building that I showed you earlier. We want to establish income streams, because the financial sustainability is an important part of this work for us. We need to figure out how to make all of this happen. Over the next 5 years, we want to begin our inventory and documentation of the buildings. And so it's going to require us to mobilize funding. And that's the big figure that we're looking at, but we're dreaming big, Tiago. I'm staying focused. I'm dreaming big. The sky's the limit. $750,000, no big deal over 5 years. We'll work it out. And just to say thank you again, this image is from one of our arts and heritage summer camps. It was a 7-year-old, no, not 7, Abigail was 9, and she had learned about these buildings, and she was encouraged to make a rendition. And she used her natural materials, and she said she's proud of our heritage, and we are proud of our heritage and very grateful to you all for recognizing that pride and acknowledging its importance. Thank you. It's just a little video.
These walls carry the stories of how wise we used to be. These walls carry the stories of how we recognized at that time and need to revisit that I and the earth are one.
You can.
Georgia, thank you very much for this for the journey, taking us also. And let's plant our trees in our roots rather in the sky than.
Yes.
Actually, Aziliz mentioned at dinner yesterday there might be some money left in ILUCIDARE, so maybe you should have a word with her in relation to the funding scheme.
Write a check.
I think we're running short of time because we have to have lunch at some point. So we have given the allowance of one question. Please.
Hello, Georgia, again. So you guys are doing an amazing job. I told you yesterday, and I will tell you now again. Just have one question. Did you actually started to see the impact on the local community of what you're doing, or not yet? Or are they starting to get interested, to be more involved in the restoration works? And are you planning into leading them to autonomy, to maybe later, independently from the organization, to start restoring the houses? You know what I mean? Or
I would say definitely in terms of restoration, the hope is that the knowledge won't just be with elders like Guy Parchment, that younger people will know the methods and be able to apply it. It might not be exactly the same, but it's to apply it in a way that makes sense for the now. In terms of the impact on community, I definitely took Aziliz's point about always needing, it's a dance. Because if you're managing power, you're coming in, you're trying to figure out what's the best way, who should we be talking to, how do we talk to them. So, working on things like the camps have been very important, I think, because children have become the gateways to families. And we've showed up not just once, but twice, and we're going back again this year. So these are the kinds of ways that I think that we are creating impact in community. We're strengthening the model for the camp this year because I used to do a lot of the coordination, and this year we want the community members and the parents to do much more of the coordination. But we've learned more now, so they can, I think, manage more. I can share more so that they can do that. So we're definitely learning and taking it step by step. The mural that we worked on, we started the process. We realized halfway through it, we're like, maybe we should have even more consultation to find out what people want or ideas, And so we had to kind of catch ourselves because we went in and they're like, oh, no, slow down, ask a question, clarify, find out. So we're building the relationships, we're building the trust, and we definitely plan to continue to maintain relationships with like Guy Parchment, and Danette, who is one of our board members. She grew up in the community, so that's an important link that we maintain. Yeah. You have questions?
I see there are no more questions in the room. Is there? We still have questions. Okay, sorry to be the bad cop. I will give a bonus question, and then we continue our discussion over lunch.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to say one word. So, earthen architecture is basically a technical issue for, I don't know if Jamaica, I don't know about the seismic aspects in Jamaica, but earthen architecture is being studied a lot. And I would just tell you Cuño Tambo. If you Google Cuño Tambo, you will see what we have been doing. Well, I was part of the team, but we have been doing for 15 years to improve the strength of earthen architecture using compatible, seismic retrofit tools. Okay. Yeah. There is a lot of trajectory there. It's a project by the Getty Conservation Institute and the Ministry of Culture in Peru.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Yes, and that's what I mean about recognizing that it's not just about putting these things back up the way they were before. It's making them better for the now. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Congratulations once again, and welcome to the EULAC community. As I said before, we will continue over lunch. We now have to break. I invite you to grab a bite downstairs. The lunch will take place in the first floor. So just follow the signs for the lift. My colleagues are also here to guide you and take the stairs if you feel like you need some stretching. And we will meet here again in 1 hour, so at 2:30 sharp for the afternoon session. I also invite our online audience to have a break and join us back in 1 hour for more discussions. This afternoon we will discuss about the learnings from the EULAC Autumn School on built heritage documentation, and we will also travel through around the world, Kosovo, Ecuador, Egypt, Ethiopia, Dominican Republic, to hear about the EULAC capacity buildings. So thank you for your attention and have a nice lunch.